Hello and welcome to Eye on Africa. I'm Clarisse Fortuné. Our top stories today. Another attempt to find peace in Sudan. The two warring parties are now in Saudi Arabia to discuss humanitarian aid and possibly an end to a conflict that has killed more than 9,000 people since April. The military is still in charge of Niger 3 months after overtaking power in a coup. We'll have a look back at the situation in the country now under sanctions. And what do Marcus Garvey, Malcolm X or Toussaint Louverture have in common? They're all part of Pan-Africanism, a movement of African solidarity that Guinea is trying to reintroduce into its youth's culture. We start in Sudan, where talks between warring factions have resumed this Thursday in Saudi Arabia. The aim is to first secure access for humanitarian aid, possibly broker a ceasefire, and lay the groundwork for peace after 6 months of war. But previous mediation attempts have yielded only brief truces, even those were systematically violated. Our regional correspondent Olivia Bizot has more.
Fresh talks have now begun in the Saudi city of Jeddah. But Sudanese and international observers aren't hugely optimistic that they're going to make that much of a difference. These negotiations are the latest in a long line of talks between the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces and the Sudanese army. The US and Saudi Arabia have brokered numerous ceasefires between the two warring sides since May, but fighting has continued in the Sudanese capital Khartoum and elsewhere, and both sides have continuously blamed each other for violating the terms of the various ceasefires. Now, during these talks, which begin on Thursday, new players are going to be on the negotiating table, including the African Union and the regional bloc IGAD. Civil leaders won't be participating in the initial phase of the discussions, but they do hope to be brought in at a later stage. Now, they've said that both sides' failure to protect civilians really shows that neither side is fit to lead Sudan moving forwards. Talks are also taking place in other parts of the region, including in South Sudan, in Juba, where army groups are meeting to discuss how to lay the groundwork for a successful ceasefire. And that is really crucial in order to prevent more damage from taking place. The war, which broke out more than 6 months ago now, has devastated Khartoum, and it's also sparked ethnic violence in West Darfur. The UN has called this conflict one of the worst humanitarian nightmares in recent history. The conflict has displaced nearly 6 million people and thousands of people have been killed.
And meanwhile, the RSF, the paramilitary forces, have taken over Nyala, Sudan's second most populous city. And as military negotiations in Jeddah have begun, Sudanese civilian political leaders have just ended talks in Addis Ababa to try to form a united front. Clotilde Hazard sent us this report from the Ethiopian capital.
It's the first of its kind since the beginning of the war. Former Prime Minister Abdullah Hamdok has brought together political figures who before now were at odds. The aim? To form a united civil front, which would improve their negotiating position by offering concrete solutions on how to end the war.
How are we going to come together to adopt a united negotiating position, agreed by all? What will this structure look like? We are in the process of preparing the ways in which we can engage regional and international communities. At some point, you have to talk to those who are carrying arms. We can't stop the war without talking to them. And there is a strong resistance to that at the moment.
Il y a une forte résistance à cela pour le moment.
The talks welcomed resistance committees who were formed during the revolution to help transition to democracy. They're opposed to alliances with political parties who they believe are affiliated with the army.
There are disagreements within civil society. We can't deny that. But during these negotiations, the Sudanese expect us to speak with one voice, especially at the moment. That's what they're waiting for.
The participants argued that including civilians in negotiations between the warring sides who are responsible for the conflict is crucial.
This war is pointless, and both sides know it. But if they just call a truce, the population won't feel safe enough to return to the country. They won't come back if there's no structure in place to ensure the ceasefire is respected.
At the end of this summit, civil forces all agreed. They want to be part of this structure so that they can help introduce a democratic government.
3 months ago, on July 26, Niger's President Mohamed Bazoum was overthrown by the military. A coup d'etat widely condemned by the international community and by the West African bloc, ECOWAS. The country is now under sanctions, and Europe and the United States have cut off their aid. Clémence Valère takes a look back.
Niamey, 26th of July 2023. Nigerian soldiers announced they have overthrown President Mohamed Bazoum and taken control of the country.
All the institutions of the Seventh Republic have been suspended. The defense and security forces are managing the situation, and all external partners are asked not to intervene.
The coup was strongly condemned by the international community and the majority of the members of the Economic Community of West African states. ECOWAS threatened the coup leaders with military intervention if they did not return power to the democratically elected president.
If peaceful means fail, ECOWAS cannot just fold its hands. Instruments include the use of force. So it is very much on the table.
A military threat that did not come to pass, as ECOWAS continued diplomatic talks while imposing economic sanctions. A financial blockade which has put a strain on Niger's state budget, 40% of which depended on international aid. Meanwhile, the junta engaged in a showdown with Paris. On the 25th of August, they ordered France to withdraw its 1,500 soldiers stationed in the country and the immediate departure of the ambassador. 2 months later, the French agreed to depart. For his part, the deposed President Mohamed Bazoum and his family are still confined to the presidential residence in difficult living conditions, according to his party. On the 19th of October, the junta accused the former leader of having tried to escape, an accusation denied by those close to him. Since the coup, the economic and security situation in Niger has deteriorated sharply. The country is facing an upsurge in terrorist attacks that the junta had promised to contain.
8 months after Bola Tinubu was elected president of Nigeria, the Supreme Court has thrown out challenges by the opposition. Atiku Abubakar and Peter Obi, the two other candidates, had wanted to reverse February's results, alleging it was marred by irregularities, including President Tinubu's education background. Sam Ulukoya explains.
The Supreme Court dismissed the petitions filed by President Bola Tinubu's two main opponents, saying their legal action lacked merit. Its challengers were former Vice President Atiku Abubakar of the People's Democratic Party and Peter Obi of the Labour Party. Their lawyers alleged that the election that brought President Tinubu to power was characterized by malpractices like massive thumb printing of ballot papers and the alteration of election figures to favor him. They also alleged violence and intimidation of opposition supporters, which stopped them from voting. The Supreme Court, however, ruled that the opposition was unable to prove its case against the president's election. The legal battle to unseat President Tinubu is one of the most divisive in Nigeria's electoral history, leaving Nigerians sharply divided on whether or not he won the election. The president has welcomed the verdict, saying it has laid to rest the question of who actually won the election. With the legal challenge against his election over, Nigerians will now focus their attention on how President Tinubu can address the country's numerous challenges. Nigeria is facing serious economic problems, with the local currency facing serious devaluation, while inflation and unemployment are on the rise. The economic problems could potentially open fresh crises for the president as he celebrates his legal victory.
Unity and solidarity of all Africans and the diaspora. A few words to define Pan-Africanism. Toussaint Louverture, Malcolm X, Marcus Garvey, names associated with this movement that might be forgotten today. Guinea is hosting a series of talks and seminars to introduce the country's youth to the concept. Our correspondent attended the event.
The audience is highly attentive here at Guinea's Kofi Annan University. The discussion this morning is focused on the introduction of a new common West African currency, the echo, set to replace the CFA franc, which is printed in France, by 2027. It's an important subject for many Pan-Africanists.
It's fundamental to note that Africans can no longer put up with monetary decisions about our currency being made outside of Africa itself.
The amphitheatre is packed with researchers, members of the public, and students. This event specifically targets the country's youth. Mamadou studies economics.
To be a Pan-Africanist is to understand the issues and how they play out in a democracy. I thought it was important to come and participate in order to further my knowledge.
Some 30 speakers will take to the stage to discuss Pan-Africanism over the course of the week across 3 universities in the capital. At a time when more and more people claim to be Pan-Africanists, one of the organisers said the concept itself needs to be more clearly defined.
We reject the West. It's as if Pan-Africanism has become a way for young people to rebel. But Pan-Africanism is not about rejecting a community, a country, or a part of the world. It is important for young people to understand that it is about integration, and that integration is not about rejection, but about bringing people together.
This event is streamed online for those wanting to follow the talks from outside of Guinea itself.
And that's it for this edition of Eye on Africa. Thank you for watching.